Straub Technologies. The Engine Performance Expo rolls on. Time for our next roundtable, something that is near and dear to the heart of Mr. Lake Speed, who has been, like, that was a geek out session right there a minute ago, Lake. But I mean that in a very positive way. The passion, the technology, you and Mark with like a great new toy and then showing how it all worked. But surface finish is what we're going to talk about. We got Mark back, of course, Chuck Lynch, Ed Kiebler, Billy Godbold. We're working you today, Billy.
Whatever, same pay, right?
That's absolutely correct. The same thing. Board. Yes, not even. No, but the snacks are good.
The snacks are
great. Coffee,
excellent.
Lots of coffee, snacks. Charles Navarro here. He was working, of course. Get in there, Charles. I'm going to have a great discussion, and you're excited about this one. Tell us.
We were saying with Mark during the surface system demo that surface finish has been the missing variable. You know, Charles and I have done as much work as anybody together and all this stuff, and obviously with Billy too, is that was the missing link in so much what we were doing. We were doing oil development, and if you don't have handle on your surfaces, you are blind. You can easily lie to yourself and accept the good results. Kind of like Jason Lyon was saying yesterday on the dyno. You know, it's a tool. You got to use it correctly, and it's easy to lie to yourself and accept the stuff you want to see and dismiss the stuff you don't want to see. And surfaces are a huge variable in what that surface texture is. And I was fortunate enough to meet Mark through Billy when we were trying to develop oils for Charles. Which is why they're all in the same panel, by the way. And then, you know, I leave Driven and I come to Total Seal. I'm like, oh, I need Ed and Chuck now. Because we got to do cylinders, right? And clamp load. I mean, I will never forget when we were there at Jasper looking at that Fuji impression film and the clamp load video we did earlier. It all relates. You have to have all that contact geometry. It all has to come together, which is why we have everybody together for the roundtable.
Tremendous.
Right. You can't understate, you know, the surface finishes. They're everywhere. Like the tip of a valve, you know, how many people grind tips of valves, gives no consideration, and then they wonder why a rocker's worn.
Yeah, roller tip versus slider tip. When you have a slider tip rocker, that surface finish on the tip of the valve is critically important. And people, you know, you start looking at metals, and you think about the strength of metals, you think about failures. Failures are never macroscopic. No. Every failure starts at a microscopic level. You know, in every failure, people take anything in my office, they say, what happened? And you have a broken part. It's quick. It's like, well, the applied forces someplace microscopic were greater than the tensile strength, someplace microscopic. And they go, oh, what's that mean? I said, it means it broke.
Yeah.
You know,
it just broke in a really small place, right, and then it propagated to a big place.
It propagates, and then they go, well, what do we do with that? And it's like, okay, well, one of two things. You've either got to figure out, why was that material weak at that microscopic point, or why were the loads high at that microscopic part? And of anyone that I know, I think the work I did with you, Comp Cams, doing exactly what you talked about, looking at the entire, you know, look at the picture. You said that the numbers were an expression.
Yes.
But the picture was the truth.
Yes.
You know, and we could look at those pictures, do that scan, look at what the lobe surface looked like, and that correlated so well with where we saw failures. As we made the bearing areas higher, as we controlled that contour, we would spread the load out over a larger area. And of everything I've ever been involved with, and, you know, whether it was parkerization, taper, everything else that we've done with flat tappets on roller cams, new metals, new heat treats, all that stuff, new lifters. Nothing made as big a difference on the number of warranties we'd see over a year than what we did by controlling the surface profile, spreading that load. So really, as far as headaches, you have taken away, you've added more years to my life than anyone that's built.
That makes up for the other headaches I've caused elsewhere.
No, that's fine.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, because I take them away, right? the chaos I create takes them away. You got to add it back.
Well, it's a balancing act. No, I think what was really cool, Billy, is you'd talked in the past about pushing material,
Yeah.
and then discovering geometry through another conversation you'd have.
Yeah, and that was from one of your former employees. One of the things. We were talking. You and I had good friends at Cummins, and I'd come up with this tool steel recipe. We'd work with Carpenter. We came up with a brand new recipe, and I was proud as a peacock. I am walking around just strutting, thinking, I have taken this up from 260 KSI to 280 KSI. And then I go up to the guy that's doing R&D at Cummins, and I'm like, hey, what materials do y'all use? And he told me one, and I kind of went, huh? And then I told him about mine and how much. And he goes, well, Billy, how much did you bring up the UTS? I'm like, I went from 260 to 280. So he went like, oh, well, that's less than 10%, isn't it? And I went, well, yeah. He goes, what if I told you that I increased my strength by 100%? And I'm thinking, well, the best steel in the world is low 300s. The worst steel is down in 150s. You can't double it. You know what I mean? So if you're 200 KSI, there is no 400 KSI. So I'm like, dude, look, I know this. You cannot double the strength. He goes, what if I reduce the load by? And I'm like, oh my goodness, I was on the wrong side of the equation. Instead of looking at making materials, do you want to make material as best you can? Absolutely.
Sure.
But that's the way you get the 5s and 10%. When you want to go in and make the huge changes, you've got to spread out the load. If you're going to spread out the load, you have to do it by surface engineering. And we talk about surface roughness, surface waviness. Mm-hmm. We talk about compressive stresses through shot peening, nitriding. It's all about surface engineering. And when I got into surface engineering, understanding what the surface did, it was really kind of a life-changing perspective.
Absolutely. So should we mention who actually had that conversation?
You can. I'm just going to,
Thank you, Roger. We appreciate your help. We appreciate you sponsoring part of the Engine Performance Expo this year, too, by the way. He's now moved on from Cummins. Yeah. He works for Valvoline. He's the head of global R&D for Valvoline. Hi, Roger. Thank you.
Yeah. And you made me feel kind of silly.
Thanks for that, too, Roger.
All right. So, moving forward, we know surfaces are hugely important. I always look to you, Ed, and say, okay, well, how do we get there, right? Because that's the tricky part. It's like, okay, we want to end up in Toledo. Just came to my mind.
Wow.
But how do you get there? Right? How do you get from here to Toledo?
Right.
That path. So
right.
I think that's where really leaning on you these last couple of years, I've learned so much of how do you apply the technology of the hone, the abrasives, and that process. I mean, my son Ben last night was telling me how excited he was to see you guys in action back there at the hone, figuring out how to hone those top fuel cylinders to get the surface we were looking for. And that it was like, it wasn't like, we want that number, you want this number, well then you just do this, you do that, and X comes out. It's like, no, it was an iterative. It was art.
Right. It is. Yeah, it's absolutely an art. But we have to have the prescription written or the description written by guys like you and Mark and Billy and everybody else, because we're the people that we do enough research. We try to get to the right surface finish that what I consider the experts want. I've always said I'm not smart enough to tell you what you need. I'm just smart enough to give you what you want.
Right.
And I have to say that I love this format, because yesterday for a couple hours and then this morning for 2 hours, I sat next to that gentleman right there and got completely re-educated.
Ben mentioned that. He's like, you guys yesterday working with that sleeve, with the surface system, it was like everyone's light bulbs were going off, and it's like, holy crap, this is a whole new thing.
That was really great. Now, let me interject here. It was cool to be able to sit around and all look at the same picture without having to pass a gauge around and guess at a number.
Yes.
We were working more like craftsmen than accountants.
Yes.
Yes. It was really cool to see the engineering minds kind of freed up to talk about shapes.
Yeah. And I have to add to what you were saying, Billy, is Mark, the probably the neatest thing about Mark is he says, quit looking at the numbers and look at the picture, because a picture's worth 1,000 words, because we get so caught up in those numbers, and when we just look at numbers, we don't understand really what those numbers are telling us.
And there's another thing, like from working at comp cams, working with the quality people you have in there. At some point, like Mark and I, if you start telling me surface parameters, you give me an RA, I've got a picture in my mind.
Yes.
Then you give it that. Then you give right. It could be either one, but I know about what it is.
Yes.
Then you tell me some of the other parameters. So each time you tell me a parameter, I'm redrawing a picture in my mind.
Yes.
You throw waviness, I'm drawing a picture in my mind. But that's after 10 years of doing this.
That's right.
And with different gifts than everybody else has.
Sure.
So I'm a mathematician. So you give me numbers, I'm going to do math, physics. You learn that sort of stuff. But when it came to the quality guys, once we had pictures of what this means, then all of a sudden the people that were manufacturing, at the machines, dressing the wheels, the people who were at the profilometer checking the part, man, they saw it and they got it. And it made when you hire good people, if you tell them a number, it's hard for them to be excited about it. But you give them a picture of it.
Right.
And it could be something like honing. Like I was at a shop and they changed the block a little bit, so it's a different sleeve. They had a great honing recipe, but it didn't work the same on each material. So instead of trying to get the same number, they started trying to get the same picture on different material, and it was great.
Right.
And it worked. Take it to the dyno, and it did exactly what it was supposed to do.
Wow. Awesome.
That speaking of the picture, that's like one of Mark and I talked about this when his book came out. It was available many years before. I bought that other book that was from the UK or whatever.
Oh yeah, we moved it. Yeah.
And because we had a profilometer, and I went in the shop, and he said, "Okay, for statistical process control, we need you to record these numbers." Okay, what's that number? Well, you just record that number because that's important, and we record it. Okay, I put this number on the chart. Oh, I want to understand what that is. So I get this book on surface finish, and then peaks and valleys and amplitude, and I'm like, oh, now I've got this mental picture that this all makes sense, and now it feels much more important than 7RA or 22RZ.
Well, and that connection is what Ed and I were talking about yesterday. We were looking at honed surface and deciding, can we add strokes or not?
Yes.
We didn't make that decision with numbers. We made that with your intuition of how much material is going to be removed. Do we have room for 5 more strokes and still keep the valleys that we need? And getting people into the other side of their brain, the left brain, right brain numbers and art, it's both. We can do both. And that's really powerful. And it was some great conversations that move the ball so quickly.
Yes.
We don't have to do 100 tests to see if statistically that column of numbers on the spreadsheet moved. We can see it right there. We can turn the knob and see the change.
Right.
So it's very cool to be in this space of art and math and engineering and science and design.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I'm up there in years, and I'm more excited today than I was 10 years ago.
That's awesome.
Because we're learning, and we're learning at such a fast pace.
Yes.
And it's like you said, and it all has to do, at least to me, the key has been, it's been this surface, the surface finish or the surface parameters or
it's all the surface engineering. It's everything about it. Because, like I said, even the carbon structure inside the sleeve. So it's all about that material and how it all interacts at the surface.
But 10 years ago, was it possible to know this? Or do we only know this now because technology has made it possible to understand it?
I don't want to hurt feelings. It's been around a long time.
Yes.
You had the original Sun and Plateau honing document.
Yeah.
Was it 83?
Yeah, 83.
Yeah. But it's that kind of thing of not invented here, or we don't need it yet, it's not broken, don't fix it. And we've had other levers we could pull. And we've pulled all those other levers. Like Billy, pulling the material lever.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep working material until
ran out.
You ran out.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so I think we're into that space. I've always talked about the evolution of my field metrology. We went from length with micrometers to position with coordinate measuring machines. Well, what's left? The geometry and the roughness and the waviness within that, from size to position to shape. And I think a lot of industries are experiencing shape is the next frontier. macro and micro shape.
Yeah, when Mark was at our shop, and I read all the textbooks, like we work with aluminum engine blocks, like Aliasil, Locasil, but I've seen pictures of what that surface is supposed to look like in a textbook. But he brought his equipment, and we put a Nicosil cylinder in, and looked at. You could see the plateau finish. You could see that there were no red spots. It was all green and just a hint of yellow on a properly honed Nicosil surface. And then that had the same RA with the Miditoyo as the Locasil surface, but then you put the microscope on it, and it's like 100% different. How do you get the same RA number on two surfaces that are 100% different?
Right.
And I had never been able to actually see those silicon particles that are exposed that makes the whole system work, because those cylinders aren't honed.
Sure.
So it functions completely different. So that goes to every material has to have the proper surface finish.
Yeah.
And it's not one size fits all recipe.
No.
Huge thanks for that, by the way. I've got the coolest demo surface in the world now, thanks to you.
Yeah.
But
Fortunately for a D-Chuck block, right? So this piece of the block came falling off, and Charles gave it to him, and it's like...
I'm so glad that block blew up. Well, it was you, Lake, that pulled that surface under the microscope the first time.
Yeah.
And I heard you go, wow. And I had to come running.
Oh, it's to me, I have it saved on the thing as one of the reference surfaces, because it's 3D. When you can see the little silicon particles in that matrix, then you can see the profile scan, and you can see each of them. You're like, and then you went back and put them in the white light.
Yeah.
So go to digitalmetrology.com. What's the page where you have all the compared surfaces?
Yeah, it's the Surface Notes blog. And
Okay,
we
Surface
just
Notes blog.
Yeah.
And you literally have a single hone, a plateau hone, an extreme plateau, a Nicosil, a Suma bore, the Locasil. It's all there in 3D.
In the same scale.
In the same scale.
So you can compare them, and they're in the library. You can download the files if you want to play with them. So
It's life-changing.
Yeah.
Just telling you.
I probably emailed that to more friends, than anything that's come out this year.
It's amazing. But it's that next level. It's the progression, right? The whole point of having conferences like this, why SAE has conferences, why STLE has conferences, why ASTM, everybody has conferences. Why? So we can get together, share, so we can get better. That's the whole idea. If we're not getting better, but who said that yesterday? If you're not working on getting better now, you're going to be worse.
You're going to be worse.
Right? So you have to keep getting better. And that's what's really great about this environment. I think that's part of it, Ed, is that culture change where information's, like I said, been around for a long time.
It's been around a long time.
But now all of a sudden we're disseminating it, and we're adopting it, and we're changing it. That's huge.
And I really do want to give you huge kudos because one of the things that you have done is make it easy to learn and comprehend. You get to some of these, like you were talking about, and these people are talking here, and I'm down here. And this gentleman right here brings it on at the level that even I understand. And I'm not the smartest hack in the group.
Well, Ed, so tell you what, when I go to some of the tribology conferences, I like the presentations that have pictures.
Yes.
Because I can learn more when there's pictures up there.
That's right.
Like, what word did you just say? I have no idea about. Oh, that picture makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, the digital metrology website, your website, has a little series called the Notebook Series.
Oh, yes.
And if you guys are interested in metrology, if you're interested in surface engineering, that's a great place to start. Go to the Notebook Series, find that on his digitalmetrology.com or something like that.
That's it.
I can't spell it, but I think it's there. Go in there, look at the Notebook Series, and go through there, and it talks about each of these things. That accessibility, because you guys are talking about 1983, and I know it's a lot before that. In World War II, there was a tremendous push to learn about needle bearings and learn about the barrel shape of needle bearings, learn about crosshatch, learn about all this stuff. It's been around, for the better part of 100 years. It's a difference between the technology being around and the technology being accessible.
Yes.
And what we're not seeing now is, we had the earlier talk on cylinder pressure.
Right.
Accessible, the technology, that's been around since World War I, with the drum and a piece of thing. But it hasn't been accessible to recently.
Right.
Same thing, the metrology side, It's been around for a while, but accessible and learning to use it.
There you go.
Yeah, that's like the Auburn Botel Speedster engine, that's straight, overhead cam, roller followers, supercharged.
Yeah.
1920s.
Right.
Right.
But just the accessibility. So that
Right.
was crazy expensive then, but
Yeah.
all those things mattered. So,
Right. And you're 100% right. You look at it in racing, you talked about not knowing when you're ahead or behind. What happens is if you're a little bit ahead, when somebody catches up with you, the first thing you do is deny it. And then as soon as you go past denying it, they're so far ahead of you, you've really got to scrape. So you've got to keep pushing forward on everything. And this has become an accessible place where people can really make a difference.
I think that's the great point, is that these technologies aren't necessarily all that new or novel. They're not unproven. They're not risky technologies. They're actually now just accessible. Where
And they're
sometimes
the opposite of risk.
right. In fact, yeah, they're the exact opposite of risk. They're actually more proven, more engineered, more studied than the stuff that you can buy or have been purchasing. These are things you can really lean into, rely on, and get better with.
Great job. And the way, I wish we had some pictures right here for me to look at because I would understand better. But I think everybody needs to go to Mark's website. First of all, check out those photographs. And this is an interesting transition to our next video, which is the future of engine parts. Which, thinking about, if this is relatively old technology that now is available and being utilized, it just gets me a little bit excited. Like, what does lie down the road? Like, what is possible in the future that maybe we have yet to do? And that's our next video. Excellent job by the panel. Thank you very much.
Yep.
And we're going to throw it to that next video, the future of engine parts, as the Engine Performance Expo moves on. What a day, what a day, what a day. Yeah, my brain is swollen. I've learned so much today. They told us, don't start cars. We are not going to listen.